Paul. My Uncle Paul is just a shade over 5 feet tall. Like a normal short Italian, he's a little rotund. He has silver white hair and still carries the air of a high school teacher. He's been living on a plateau of regret for about 10 years. His son Jared was born in September 1975, just before I was. They called him Moose because he was such a big baby with folds all over his body. His characteristic feature was his smile. It was 50% mischievous and sly, and you could see it when he did things like cutting down one of the fir trees in front of his father's house. The other 50% was kind and compassionate, like when we found out that he delivered that tree to a poorer neighbor with lights and presents for Christmas. Jared was always giving. He would win awards for weightlifting or running, but he would stuff the trophies under his bed or put the medals into his top drawer so nobody would know. Now, I was kind of a dork, a bit of a nerd. I took the military entrance examination just because it was a test and I wanted to see how well I would do. I aced it. Jared wanted to be ROTC, so we made a pact. He was going to go military, and I was going to go to college, and then we would share our stories as we had the opportunity to connect. And so began a very intermittent communication. Twice a year, he would call from the DMZ in Korea, from Bosnia, from Afghanistan. The calls were always coming at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I would answer them characteristically in the same way. Hi, Jared. And then I remember he would always laugh. You could hear that sly smile, that kind smile, and he would ask me if I could wake my wife up so she would make him cookies. In September 2006, I got a call about that same time, and it was my father, not Jared. I answered it in the characteristic way, hey, Jared, but my father's voice was somber, and he said something terrible has happened. And 3 days later, we went to Dover Air Force Base, where we received him back, covered in a flag. 3 years later, Jared was given the Congressional Medal of Honor, an award that is given to only 3,500 people since the Civil War. And we stood in the White House, and Obama eulogized him in a way that was very unfamiliar. And one of the side effects of winning the Congressional Medal of Honor is that you have bridges named after you, and gyms, a country song that becomes #1 on the charts. You get to drop the puck at the Bruins game or throw out the first pitch, and my Uncle Paul has done that every single time. And you're asked to give speeches. And he gives speeches about how Jared threw grenades and fought off 60 Taliban to the 16-member force, about how he called in the close air fire support, about how he couldn't leave a man behind and ran into enemy fire 3 times before losing his life. He made his peace with God, and he said, give my love to my family. Uncle Paul tells a speech where he describes raising his son to be kind and compassionate and strong and firm and most of all, to embrace that compassion. But he ends that speech asking a very critical question. Did I do the right thing? He's been standing on that plateau of regret for almost 10 years. At Jared's funeral, my 7-month-old daughter was there. Jared had never met her, but he desperately wanted to. She didn't know any better, so she smiled and she laughed and she gave hugs to people who desperately needed them. And in my arms, she wrapped her hands around my neck as I listened to the crack of 21 guns in salute and the desperate cry of taps. She showed compassion. Raising a child is one of the hardest things you can do. You're always in fear. You're always afraid of doing the wrong thing. You just hope to instill in them values like strength and honor and valor, and most of all, compassion. I've raised my daughter Michaela, telling her always about her cousin who had those values. And as I continue to raise her, I raise her to be the answer to my uncle's critical question. I raise her to be the answer that you should have no regrets. if you raise your child to be kind and strong and courageous, and most of all, compassionate, my Uncle Paul should have his answer. There are no regrets. Thank you.